Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Here we are in January of course 2012. The world is not over yet. It is the 13th, and that means it is the wee morning hours after another patch update here. And very excited to be doing this. We kind of took a little bit of a break from the patch updates. One, because to be honest, not very many patches coming out with any significant additions. And two, I mean, it was the holiday time. Gotta spend time with the family. And speaking of people that are basically family, here with Sunsfan. How's it going?
Hello, how are you doing, Zeno? Very nice to see you again.
You can tell we're both Russian, you know. So.
Absolutely.
Runs in the family. Anyways, guys, we have a huge patch. Very similar to a certain number of spends here. So we're going to jump right into things here. First, we're going to kind of go over some of the additions to the actual Dota 2 client, and then kind of go over sort of this quote-unquote parity with the 6.73 Dota patch, which basically means a whole ton of balance changes. So right off the bat, just kind of going over some of the UI changes in this new patch here. First of all, they kind of made some basic changes to the practice lobby, just made it look a little bit nicer. It looked pretty ugly before, to be honest, and I think it looks very clean now, so that's always nice. And then everyone can actually see what the game modes and everything are, or what the settings are, so that's always nice.
Yep, and it's just one of those things that you need to add to a game to make it more polished, so not too much to say there, although there's one little thing where you can change the version that you're going to be using, which is more helpful for people that are running tournaments, such as perhaps us. And that's going to be very helpful, so you don't actually, like, when they break the game, which is inevitable for when they patch it, you can actually just roll it back to whatever the stable version for the tournament play is. So you can basically just add heroes at will, and it's not really going to affect anybody on a professional level, so good to see that they finally implemented that.
Yeah, I think that's something, of course, with a giant patch like this, they wanted to make sure that was in there just so they don't step on any tournament toes, as it were. They also added a kind of cool new feature, I think, for watching a replay. You have a kind of an auto speed feature, which basically allows you to skip over the boring parts and get straight to the action. It kind of works similar to how Auto Director works, and that Auto Director kind of focuses you in live games, you know, on the parts where kills might be taking place. This basically finds, you know, when the action's going to be, and then we'll slow it down to normal time during those points, and then kind of fast forward you through all the boring parts where it's just people farming for 18 million years.
Yeah, and I just feel like they think everybody's really lazy. That's just my take on it.
I'm lazy, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I know there have been times in certain other games where I've had to watch a whole ton of replays at once, and after a while, it just gets to the point where you're like, God, I just wish I could skip to the parts where things actually happen. Done with this 38 minutes of one kill. Anyways, kind of glad to see that. They also they made some, I don't want to call them significant changes, but they did make some tweaks to the minimap. They redid kind of the background texture. You can kind of see where the stairs are, so you have a better idea of kind of where the I don't know, there's like cliffs and stairs and stuff like that. Also, they kind of added some more information when you hold down Alt on the minimap. You can see different icons for the heroes, so you look like a big scary icon instead of the names. You can also see who's actually TPing in when people are using TPs to go to towers and all that kind of stuff. And just kind of various other small changes like that. But yeah, I think they're nice touches that kind of add to a feeling of polish when you're playing a game.
Yep, and I think the funniest one that they added was, I'm sure they got a lot of complaints about this. When you mute somebody, they could still draw like obscene pictures on the minimap, but now when you mute them, they can't. Well, they can draw, but they'll only see it themselves. You won't actually see what they're drawing. So beautiful addition there, very game breaking, as you can probably imagine. But yeah, like you said, most of this stuff is just polish. It's not the most exciting stuff. The minimap looks a lot better. It's better for coordinating ganks and whatnot, especially just quick information. Just holding down Alt, you can see right away. You don't have to just split-second decision timing. Basically, what it comes down to. It's definitely helpful in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know anyone that would draw obscene things on the minimaps to signify, you know, ganking past or anything like that. I would never do such a thing.
I think I did that during a cast too. So
yeah, it's very hard not to draw penis. I'm not gonna lie. It's just calling for it. Speaking of visual things that you're now thinking of on the visual side, the major thing is basically they tweaked Pudge's Rot. Pretty significantly. And honestly, I didn't really like how it looked before, but I could tell that it was on, so I'm not really sure what the big deal is, but they quote-unquote made it way less subtle. So now instead of a ugly-looking small amount of green, rotty cloud, you have a gigantic fuzzy ball of cloud that follows them around. So I'm not a huge fan of this. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think it looked ugly before and it looks twice as ugly now just because it's not even the texture, it's not even the particles that they're using that is the problem. The problem is it looks so static. It just looks like a ball. Like if he moves, it moves perfectly with him, which doesn't seem not that this is the most realistic game ever, but it's just one of those things that it gets stuck in my mind where there's no trailing effect. It's literally like he's stuck in a ball of
Moss.
gas or something disgusting that would come out of my body, which of course isn't disgusting because I'm awesome, but yeah, it's just not I don't know. It's more noticeable for sure, but I didn't have a problem, like you said, seeing it before, so I'm not sure what that was all about.
Yeah, and finally on the audio side, I feel like people at least claim that this has changed every time, or I don't even know, but they slightly lessened the volume of the match ready sound.
Thank
which
God.
should come to no shock as anyone, is seriously one of the most annoying things ever. Other than watching horror movies, there's nothing that frightens me more sitting at my computer in the dark, just kind of patiently waiting to join a match, than all of a sudden hearing this blast into my ears of the match ready sound, which, as maybe people that play with me think is a good thing, since I apparently have an issue sometimes readying up. But
Well,
hey, what am I going to do?
the funny thing is they actually supposedly fixed this before, and it does it like 50% of the time for me now. And so I haven't even tested it out yet, to be perfectly honest. Since we're right on the ball here at Dota Cinema, we're just releasing this as soon as possible. But I'm hoping
late hours at the office.
I'm hoping it's actually fixed, because if it's not, then I will just kill myself, because it scares the crap out of me every single time. I had to get extra pair of boxers every single time. I mean, it costs money.
And the best thing is now when you are streaming, you happen to have a webcam too, so people can see you jolt upright in shock
Yeah.
as you are, nicely informed that you can join a match. And now, of course, we get to the fun part, which is the two new heroes that were added, Spirit Breaker and Silencer. I think we'll just pick the first one on the list and go with Spirit Breaker. I really like this hero. I think he'll play pretty well, especially with some of the changes made that we'll kind of go over a little bit later, or maybe we won't. I don't know. There's like 8 million changes. I think his visuals look pretty good. He looks like a relatively unique character, and unlike some of the other characters that they have very bland kind of colorings, he definitely stands out. He's like this nice, vibrant, like glowing blue color. And it seems like he'll play, and I think he'll play in a fun way for general matchmaking games.
Yeah, and actually it's funny because when we used to play this guy like 3 years ago, back in Dota 1, it was basically just a pub stomp hero. And I mean, you could still argue the same thing, but I've definitely seen him, not on a consistent basis, but he can definitely carry, so on a competitive level. So I look forward to perhaps seeing him in a future match. But yeah, he's very exciting. One of those heroes that just ganks the crap out of him. He goes through freaking cliffs, for God's sake, like it's insane. You won't see him coming, and I mean, it's a little bit one-dimensional in the fact that he's just a single target for the most part, unless he can Aghanim Scepter, which increases his ultimate to be actually a little bit of AoE, but still mostly single target, but still very, very effective on a ganking level. So I'm going to be excited to see him being played. But yeah, he looks awesome. His effects look awesome, and you're right. I mean, a lot of the heroes have been like, we're going to get to the next one, which kind of does look bland, not to give anything away, but Spirit Breaker definitely is not bland. He looks very cuddly in a disgusting way, if that makes any sense.
It's true. That's actually the first thing I thought when I looked at him is, God, it's like kind of like a beast-like Smurf with, I don't know.
It's a deformed Smurf on heroin or something. On steroids. That's what I was thinking of, steroids.
Maybe they'll quote us on that description, at some point.
There you go.
The other hero is Silencer, of course, who... it's nothing that really gets me too excited, because I was never a huge fan of seeing that hero in the game, but definitely a hero that, probably not as exciting as Spirit Breaker in looks or in how he plays, but yeah, it's another hero added to the game. I think his ultimate kind of visually looks pretty cool, but I was really hoping to have an effect where it actually silences all the sound for the enemies, and unfortunately it doesn't do that, so that's kind of disappointing. Other than that, yeah, it's fine. Nothing too thrilling for me, I guess.
As far as effects, I completely agree. Nothing impressive. Not that it needs to be. I mean, don't get me wrong. As far as hero, though, very good hero to be implemented in the pool. I think against any hero that has any combination or any comboing type skills or any team fight capabilities for your team, he's going to be crippling towards them. So it's gonna be he's definitely gonna be a hero you'll see from time to time on the competitive level. But the funny thing is, I'm looking at the hero list here. If you go between him and Dragon Knight, they look exactly the same. Like one has his helmet a little lower and is darker, and exactly the same color scheme, and it's an interesting choice to completely copy, something that you've already made.
Yeah, and speaking of exactly the same, by the way, I played two of these two heroes right in a row, just testing them out, and their voices seem so similar. And for Spirit Breaker, the voice kind of fits the hero, but for Silencer, I didn't really get it. It just seems like kind of an odd voice, I think, for that hero, and especially releasing two heroes that basically have the exact same sounding voice. Not really sure.
It's the same voice actor, basically.
Why? And that's kind of what I was hoping. I'm like, okay, maybe they just couldn't get the right voice actor for Silencer, and they're like, okay, listen, we need you to do these because we need to release two heroes because we've been teasing these poor Dota 2 beta players, by not releasing anything in a little while, and they'll end up changing it a little bit later. So cross your fingers on that one.
Oh, I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't even matter that much. I mean, it's just the voice, and sure, they're similar, but I don't care personally.
Yeah,
I mean, it's kind of
something I would have noticed if they didn't release both of them at the same time, and I didn't just play them both like one right after the other.
I mean, for all we know, there could be another hero that has the exact same voice that we just forgot about. So
that is true. Well, speaking of audio, we can go into nope, not going to go into that. We're going to go right into
the big boy patch.
6.73 balance changes, and I have to tell you guys, we're not going to be able to touch every single change in this patch because
I'm showing it right now how long it is. Let's see. It's gonna scroll here. I'm just keep scrolling, and this is where it ends. And
this is like if you took the intro to like every single Star Wars movie and like appended them onto each other and just had them scroll, it would basically be a movie in and of itself. I mean, it's freaking huge.
The funny thing is not even half the heroes are implemented, so you can imagine how long the Dota 1 patch was, because it is ridiculous. But keep in mind that once you're at this point of the video, this video is going to keep going. We're going to go into the 6.73 parity patch notes that Xeno was talking about. But if you've already heard these, then you don't necessarily need to stick around. But if you want to hear any changes that might affect you, then by all means, enjoy the ride. I mean, there are a lot of changes we're not going to go over. For example, Alchemist being changed and Anti-Mage. Slight tweaks to them. I mean, Anti-Mage definitely needed a nerf, to say the least, and he got it with the reduced armor and whatnot. But we're not going to go over every single one. We're just going to touch, certain points here and there.
Yeah, Anti-Mage is one of those heroes where you pretty much just picked him if you wanted to win, unless you were us last night. But we won't get into that horrible string of games.
We lost 8 of 9. Yeah, by the way, if you guys want to watch me lose 8 of 9 games in a 10-hour period, check out the Own 3D stream that we got going. It's own3d.tv/Dota Cinema. Can't wait to see you guys there.
I can't wait for more people to be on there so that we can get more people in chat making fun of us.
I know.
And lose over and over again. It's really kind of disappointing because I feel like there should be more criticism and there's just nothing. Just nothing. It's like playing in front of It's like what it must be like to play is like the Atlanta Hawks. You just have terrible fans.
Yeah.
Anyways, first off, we can go right off the top of the alphabet with Axe. And I think he's one person that actually got pretty significant buffs in this balance patch, so to speak. And we actually had some issues with an Axe that would kind of pop out of the jungle and spam us with Battle Hunger every once in a while when we were away from a creep wave, and that was very annoying. And now that's even more effective. He gets a little bit more intelligence right off the bat, so he can spam that a little bit better. And also basically got buffs to pretty much everything else, so I think he got a nice little boost.
Yeah, he got small buffs, but a lot of them. And I mean, as you can see, just from looking at the list here, Culling Blade reduced by 4 seconds. I'm not going to go through everyone. You guys can read it. Hopefully you can read it. If not, then I apologize for not reading this out loud, but I'm sorry. But yeah, you get like the 4% movement speed buff for every target that's affected by Battle Hunger, which means once since it can stay on for somebody so long, you can apply it to multiple targets eventually. You can gain a lot of movement speed, which will help with ganks and whatnot. So we'll see if he gets picked up more because of that. And I think the biggest buff for him, or I should say the two biggest buffs, is his counter helix and his ultimate. So for counter helix, the damage increase is from 175 to 190, which doesn't seem like a lot, but considering that on top of the fact that the cooldown is decreased from 0.55 to 0.5, I think you guys are going to notice a little bit of a difference there. I think that's a pretty big buff. And then the ultimate is the most interesting. When you get a kill with Culling Blade, you're going to unleash a war cry in a 600 AoE, giving temporary movement speed to anybody around you for 25% for 6 seconds. So just an interesting, team fight mechanic where I don't know about you, Xena, but anytime there's an axe on our team, since I never play axe, and they take a kill with Calling Blade, I just always feel like it's a KS, even though it's
And it's
not.
always the very first kill that everyone is focused. And you're
Yeah.
like, okay, that guy's dead, and then Axe comes running, and he's like, bam, I got my kill, and then
Yeah.
we all die. What's up? But I do agree that at least adds that little like function of actually helping your team. You're like, oh, cool. Now we get like a little movement bonus. It helps it out. And 600 AOE is a pretty substantial AOE, and that I think in any kind of team fight, that's really going to help out your team. So I really like that change specifically.
And the next change I want to talk about is, I was talking about this with Purge in our last cast, is that Dragon Knight, let me find in the patch notes here. Dragon Knight, when he's in dragon form, his stun, which is called Dragon's Tail, the range is increased from basically a melee 150 range to 400, which, when you look at it from an art style, or I don't even know what style I'd be thinking here, but any non-balance style, if you're looking at it from that perspective, that makes sense. I mean, he's a freaking dragon, and Dragon's Tail is going to be longer now that you're actually freaking dragon. But from a balance perspective, it's an interesting change because he's picked up semi-consistently already on the competitive scene. So it's interesting that they want to change something like that where he's already pretty powerful.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And with Dragon Tail before, it's really going to be when you're in the middle of a huge fight, you're kind of auto-attacking someone, and you're usually going to cast that on someone, obviously basically melee range, that you're basically kind of really focusing on. Whereas with 400 range, that kind of allows you to be a little bit more flexible with a very significant stun, in that you can kind of pick and choose who you want to take out of a fight. So I'll be kind of curious to see how that cast range change will kind of change how it's played. But I agree from a conceptual standpoint, obviously that fits the dragon form a little bit better.
And the next one I want to talk about is Skeleton King. Although, as you can see from the list, they didn't exactly stick to the ABCs here. Skeleton King's just, it's like right in the middle there, kind of a little bit of a, I don't know what that's all about. But like we're going to skip over Kunkka, for example, but this is just a perfect example of how this patch basically went. He got a lot of small buffs that I think he's going to be played a lot more too. But a good example of what we've seen on multiple heroes is his Tidebringer Cleave, which it would, when you level it up, it would increase the AoE of it. But now it's just a static 500 across the board. And I think just more consistency throughout every hero, I think, is what IceFrog's trying to do here. And I think that's a good idea. I mean, less randomness. I think I like the randomness aspect, the RNG aspect, but limiting that to a certain degree is really important. But going over Skeleton King, which, only reason I bring this up is because he's awesome and I freaking love him. But where is it? Okay, Reincarnation cooldown basically is the big change because it is the longest, I believe, cooldown in the game at 300 level 1. And although it's not only changed by 40 seconds level 1, level 3, which is the big one, decreased the cooldown from 140 to 60 seconds. So that's going to be a big change, I think, for Skeleton King.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. And I guess intuitively when I look at that, the one thing I always like to see is when I look at something, I say, oh, that's going to lead to more aggressive play. That's always a good thing for me, because I like seeing more action than less action, I guess, if you want to put it simply. So a lot of times when I'm playing Skeleton King, personally, like, you don't really want to get into team fights unless your ultimate's up. So I think with a 60-second cooldown, I mean, that's very short. I mean, when you get later into games, you're usually dead for longer than 60 seconds anyways. So I think that is a nice change, and with Skeleton King, it'll basically make for more action in games.
Yeah, and that's one of those heroes. We don't really see him that much, but he's every now and then you see him in a competitive game, and I think this might bring him to the point where he's picked a little bit more consistently. I mean, you see Dragon Knight a hell of a lot more, so we'll just see how these changes actually affect the competitive scene. But the next one is actually completely random. I just wanted to bring this up because it's hilarious. Mirana, they fixed the arrow damaging but not stunning invisible units. Basically, when you shoot an arrow at, like, let's say a Weaver that's invisible, and I thought this was a bug and people weren't telling me it wasn't, which I guess it technically might not have been a bug to begin with, but because they ported it from Dota directly. But if the arrow hit and he was invisible, he'd only take the damage and not get stunned. I always found that really weird, and it didn't really make any sense to me personally. So it's good to see the change, basically.
Agreed. And moving on to Necrolite, yeah, they did a little bit of an AoE buff on the Death Pulse, which kind of allows it to basically be it's a static 475 now rather than scaling up. And I mean, I can't imagine that making a huge difference, but that will allow for a little bit better, I guess, kind of harass early in games in a lane with the passive if you want to go that route. So, I again don't know if that will make a huge difference in how it's actually played out, but who knows. The other thing is now if you get a kill with your status passive, you basically get a whole bunch of mana. And I think that's a nice change because in the middle of team fights, especially early in the game, you can find yourself running out of mana very quickly if you spam a couple heals, you might use your ultimate. So basically, like if you use your ultimate and get a kill, then you basically get a whole bunch of that mana back, which I like.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing for me, so like I was talking about, the consistency with the AoE and the Death Pulse is going to be huge, I think, throughout the game. The Heartstopper aura, which I don't have listed for you, they basically changed that by 0.1, so it's not a big change, I don't think. But yeah, if you have your passive Sadist at level 4 and you KS with your ult, now just picture this, because this is the problem, I think, since Necrolite isn't really built as an intelligence here, it's built more like a strength, where you get really tanky items. And let's say you use your ultimate on somebody after like a couple death pulses or something like that. You're completely out of mana, and you've KS somebody most likely, because let's not kid ourselves, that's another KSing skill. But now when you do it, you get a ton of your freaking mana back, and you can basically death pulse the crap out of them, continue to do so. I think this is a huge change, and I hope, although I've never been a fan of this hero just because he doesn't have any stun or slow of any sort other than his ultimate it's a stun, but it's not really reliable since it's your ultimate. I think this is a hero that needs to come back to the competitive scene on a more consistent basis, at least. And I hope to God that this brings him back, because I think that's a really, really good change.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it's kind of interesting because when you look at another similar ultimate in Axe, they kind of added an additional benefit to kind of getting that early, I don't want to call it a KS necessarily because it might not be, but just an early kill. Giving that extra mana in team fights allows
They're promoting
him to throw out
KSing.
more heals and help out his team. Well, basically, it gives some more benefit to that early kill, which is basically what you see very commonly, at least in public games. So that's always nice. Sand King got a little bit of a buff with his ultimate. Basically, it can slow through BKB or any kind of magic immunity, which is always nice.
Well, I always, not to interrupt, I always wondered why, like, big ultimates like that, like, for example, Earthshaker, the initial damage will go through BKB, but the splash will not. And I always wondered, like, why doesn't Sand King have something similar to that? And I think this is, it's not the same as far as, I mean, obviously you're not going to take any damage, but I think the slow is really important. So I think, although some people might consider this a small change, I think that's pretty significant, especially when you consider late game when, BKBs really do make that much of a difference.
Yeah, and I think, especially with the slow, speaking of, later in the game, that's almost just as important as the damage. He does put out a lot of damage with his ultimate, but it's not necessarily as much as, as you mentioned, Earthshaker or something like that. So, do like that change. And the other thing is, and this is kind of a weird buff that we were talking about before, Caustic Finale duration is now gone from, or 8 seconds from 2. And I guess I look at that and I'm just, I don't really know why they made that change.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think conceptually behind, what purpose there is, and I'm sure there are plenty of people that can come up with, a good reason why they did that, but I just don't. 8 seconds is a long time. That's genuinely a long time. It's basically guaranteeing that it will explode in a Caustic Finale, basically, no matter what.
Well, basically, this is, when I first heard this is what I'm thinking. You have a solo SK, let's say, that's actually picking up Caustic Finale, and you hit each creep once, and then you end up timing it right where you can actually Burrow Strike to kill them all. That is a lot of freaking splash damage coming out. So if it's on a hero, if they actually, work that out that way, then that is, that's insane. So I'm very interested to see why they actually changed it. I think a lot of it has to do with most people don't pick up Caustic Finale unless you're soloing against like a Broodmother or something like that, and Broodmother obviously is considered somewhat overpowered at this point, so maybe that will lessen that to a certain extent. But yeah, it's very questionable. And I'm not saying, obviously, I'm not a balancer by any means, but just from an outside perspective, from a casting perspective, it's just interesting to say the least, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Yeah, and it just seems odd because I think the places, even now, it doesn't seem like that really changes the times where Caustic Finale is a good skill to pick up, so. And I didn't really feel like it was horribly underpowered as it was. So, anyways, I don't know. A lot of these changes are kind of changes where it's sort of like, well, I don't really get it, but we haven't really seen it in play in Dota 2 yet, as obviously the patch just came out. So we have to kind of take a wait-and-see approach with some of these.
Sven!
Your favorite. Uh, every time I see him, I just can't stop thinking of Sven's Revenge, which of course is on the Dota Cinema YouTube site. If you guys have not seen that yet, which I would imagine you are if you're watching this video, but should definitely go check that out along
Yeah,
with Sven's.
For people that didn't like Sven's Revenge, or no, I shouldn't say people that didn't like it, people that didn't find it funny, get
Just
some
haven't learned to
humor.
like it.
Like, seriously, you guys have awful sense of humor. Come on. I mean, it's freaking hilarious. I mean, I've watched it so many, like, when I was making it in the production or whatever you want to call it, I would seriously laugh so hard at my voices. Because I'm not, you guys may think I'm a professional or something, but I don't really do this very often, so it's a lot of fun to do. And
Yes, judging by my voices, you might think I've done this for
I know.
movies and video games in the past.
Exactly. I know I sound like a professional, but seriously, guys. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to do, and hopefully we can come up with another one somewhat soon, although I wouldn't hold my breath for quite a while on that. But yeah, it was a
so
lot
just,
of fun.
Just as a lesson for all of you that my mom once taught me, Shannon can be very sensitive about these things. So when you don't like something, like when I don't like lima beans, for example, I might just say, instead of, oh, I hate lima beans, I'd say, I haven't learned to like them yet. And that's a very true statement, and I think you guys can now use that on all of our YouTube videos in the future.
I just want to go off on a little tangent here. For people that don't like the type of humor that we use, which is fine, like that's perfectly fine not to like it, but I feel like a large portion of the people that don't like that kind of humor, like the quote-unquote immature type of humor, are people that are pretending to be more mature than they are, if that makes any sense. And that's something we...
People that go to art galleries is what you're trying to say.
Yes, exactly. That's a perfect example. I mean, it's just, I don't know if, I thought it was an American type thing, but it doesn't seem like that's the case. It seems like it's a worldly type thing where people pretend to be older than they are, they pretend to be more mature than they are. Like, bowel movements and stuff like that's funny. I mean, come on, people. I mean, look at all the movies that come out, all the comedies that are, like the big sellers, if you will, like, like Hangover or whatever. They all have that kind of humor and people love it. So eat my balls. No, I'm just kidding. But if you didn't enjoy it, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. But overall, I thought most people liked it actually. So I was glad to see the reception, if you will. But on to Sven, Zeno. On to Sven.
Yes, on to the actual balance patch changes here. Sven got a little bit of a buff to the cleave. They also made his ultimate no longer purgeable, along with a couple other things in the patch. Basically, they're making certain buffs unable to be purged, which I think is a good change, especially if it's something like an ultimate, because that's one of the major strengths of the hero, and be able to counter that with a cheap item is a little silly. Overall, again, when I look at this hero, I don't really think it changes too much, other than, again, helping him out just a little bit, playing with more of a kind of a semi-carry physical damage role. The one change I do like that drove me absolutely crazy when I played Sven is that they removed the cast time for his Warcry. Because, I mean, when you're chasing somebody and want to use that to speed up, basically you lose any distance you would have normally closed between you and that hero by having a little bit of cast time on the Warcry.
And I think overall, and just in case you guys were wondering, for the preview that we just did on Sven like a few days ago, these changes we already talked about during the, I used these numbers because I knew they'd change it for this patch, so it's nothing new for that aspect. But overall, I think he's more, I mean, honestly, the changes are quite small, but I think the purge effect, not being able to purge his ult off, is huge in the fact that you can actually use him as a carry and not have to get BKB, which I think it was considered a requirement. And I mean, for most games it still might be, but I think just all these changes amalgamating into, a hero that is able to carry more often, since he's only used as support right now. And I think he's way more flexible than that.
Mm-hmm. And then moving on to Zeus at the end of the alphabet, although this does not follow the traditional alphabetic path, I guess. I'm kind of curious to see what you think of these changes. Basically, they buffed Arc Lightning a little bit as far as damage. They lowered the cooldown on Lightning Bolt. The one thing that I'm kind of curious as to what your thoughts are on the static field. Now affects creeps, also hits invisibility, or invisible heroes. And I mean, I guess I'm not really sure why they did that. That's probably good for kind of pushing a creep wave or farming a little bit, but overall, I mean, especially if you're playing in mid, that's almost a negative, because then you end up kind of pushing the lane a little bit more than you normally would. I mean, again, that's one of those changes where I look at that and I don't really understand from a balance standpoint what that really does.
Well, I look at it this way. So Zeus is not played, period, right? And these changes, I don't think you're going to change that fact, but they help in the fact where, I mean, you're talking about pushing. Pushing can be really helpful in mid if you want to get the runes, which he has no real, I mean, even with Arc Lightning before this change, he even just spamming is still somewhat hard to push, especially when you're going against somebody that has skills that can actually do it, like a Rasta or, you know, a Shadow Fiend or something like that. So I don't think these changes are huge in that fact, in that aspect, but like the Arc Lightning, for example, I think the extra damage is big because it bounces a lot. People don't realize how much that freaking bounces. In the static field, affecting creeps, it's going to help you farm. It's going to help you push in those situations that, I mean, they're somewhat, you know, isolated and whatnot. But I think the farming thing is the biggest thing where he's not a good farmer.
I mean, I agree with that. I just feel like, okay, so for example, level 4 Arc Lightning you're not going to have early in the game, which is when, you know, pushing up that lane to get runes would be more viable anyway. So I understand kind of what they're trying to do. I just don't know. Again, that's like the Caustic finale. I just look at that and I go, really? Is that gonna really make that much of an effect early in the game?
Yeah.
Yeah, who knows?
Well, I mean, usually you get 1 level Arc Lightning, 1 level Static Field, 3 in Lightning Bolt, right? So at level 5 you have 1 in each of the other 2 and then 3 in Lightning Bolt. And I mean, since Static Field actually works on creeps, it'll help push a little bit. And again, I haven't actually seen this in person, so it remains to be seen how much difference it makes. And just on paper, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. You're right. So not a big deal. But moving on from there, we're actually going to start with some items. What do you think about that, Zeno?
Very exciting.
And actually, well,
around Christmas time. So
we're gonna leave the best for last, which is the brand new items that you can see on the screen right now. I'm gonna go down here. We're gonna go over some balance changes to the current items, and we'll talk about the new ones afterwards.
Now, to be honest, I never really understood that strategy. It's kind of like having dinner and then dessert. If you like dessert the most, eat it first. So then you're still hungry. You're not full. You know, you didn't get full on crappy dinner. Now you're not going to enjoy your dessert. But moving on to the actual topic.
If that were the actual strategy of everyone, then I think everybody would be obese because I would eat so much dessert until I'm full, and then I wouldn't be able to eat my dinner. So
that is true. Okay, so Boots of Travel, they got a slight decrease in cost, basically costed 200 gold less, which I actually think is a nice little buff to that item as far as certain heroes where if you get that quickly, such as Tinker, it's very helpful. I also got a little bit of a movement speed buff from 95 to 100. I look at that and I go, cool, but I don't know how much that really matters.
It's an even number. I think that's the most important part. They wanted it even. Like, let's just go for 100. I mean, it'll sound a lot. I mean, honestly, a lot of this stuff, what people don't realize is a lot of this stuff, even if it doesn't make that much of a difference in reality, it's the mindset. It's just knowing that something's been buffed. Just the idea of it makes people want to try it more often. And I think Boots of Travel is not utilized as much as it could be because they're amazing boots. It's just it costs so much, and I think that the 200 does make a difference. But I think most of this is just like a mind trick, if you will.
Now, okay, I hate to go off on another tangent, but I just have to say that when you have very precise numbers, they feel more arbitrarily come to. And the only reason I say this is because, for example, I work for a company where I'm involved in pricing certain products. And we theoretically could price them at a nice round number, like, say, $280. But I go, no, we want to make the customer believe that we very precisely came to whatever final number that is. So I make it $285.29, you know? Yeah, very precise number.
I hate it when
there's
people...
no reason for that.
Yeah.
But I feel like from an outside perspective, it feels like there's more thought gone into it. But anyways,
if stores actually sold things like based on the dollar and didn't use change at all, I would be so much happier. It would be amazing.
I hate pennies.
I literally throw them away. I think that's illegal. I didn't say that.
Yeah. Not gonna call the police on you or anything. Where's my phone? Moving on to Butterfly, Evasion got a nice little 5% buff, making it from a nice round even number to an odd number, but hey, that's okay.
And this one is more indicative of a quote-unquote, I don't know why I said quote-unquote, a new item that we'll go over later, which is why this was changed. So, but it's a good buff overall, obviously.
Yeah, and Divine Rapier actually got a nice 50 damage buff as well, and I think, honestly, when I look at that, that makes me happy just because I feel like that's one of those all-in, oh no, we're down, we gotta make a huge gamble here and maybe make something happen. That really kind of feeds into that mentality. It's a big all-in item, does a lot of damage, but obviously you run the risk of losing it, so I like that change.
Yep, nothing much to say off the fact of that. Lincoln Sphere, now this is a huge change. Now I'm looking. If you look at the Lincoln Sphere, it adds 10 damage for all count to count for a component bonus. That's fine. Honestly, not that. I mean, you don't really get Lincoln Sphere for damage, but the biggest change is it no longer is triggered by Medallion of Courage or Urn of Shadows, which is a great change. I'm not sure why it ever did, because those are such cheap items that essentially, like, completely makes that item worthless. So great changes. I mean, do you have anything to add after that? But I mean, that's
Oh, not really. I mean, you basically had a very expensive, almost 5K item countered by an item that could cost all of what, like 800 and some odd gold. So, I agree with that.
And then Orchid Malevolence. Let me see where that is. Was actually changed big time, and I don't have the stats on hand, so I'm gonna go off of memory from when I was reading like a month ago, or whenever the actual patch for Dota 1 came out. But the recipe was reworked. Instead of 3 Oblivion staffs, it's now 2 plus a 775 gold recipe. So you end up saving, let's just say it's like 800, something around there. 800 gold, so you can definitely get it earlier. Now the stats do go down a little bit, and the biggest one that goes down is the mana regeneration. I remember this specifically because it was the highest mana regeneration item in the entire game at 225%, and if memory serves me right, it's at 150% now. So pretty big nerf in that regard, but it does allow you to get it a pretty decent amount earlier, because it does take a while to get, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the end I kind of like that change. It makes it more of sort of a middle tier towards, we can't really get a sheep stick or anything like that, but we want to, have some kind of disable or silence. So that makes that a little bit more feasible. And on some heroes where you get it, you don't really need the stats that it gives and the attack speed or the mana regen as much. So you're really the main reason why you get Orchid isn't the stats, it's the silence.
Yep, agreed. And this is my favorite change. I'm
Yes.
taking this. I'm sorry. This is the best change ever made in any game in the history of mankind. Let me just scroll down here. The Courier has quite a few changes here, and I'm sure you're going to be a big fan of this, considering that you...
Glaring at you.
We'll talk about your experience right after go over the changes here. So the Courier will now give 150 gold to each enemy player that kills it, instead of 300 gold for the one person that kills it, which I think is good. It gives the whole team, reason to actually go after the Courier. The Courier no longer drops items, and the reason this is a big deal is because Xeno may or may not have lost his bottle about 5 minutes into a game yesterday, and we lost because of it. Is that correct?
All right, I just want to say it was not 5 minutes. I think that'd be a terrible freaking bottle time.
Whatever it is.
But yeah, this is me in middle. Oh, I'm actually winning the lane. Oh, we've lost like 6 games in a row. Oh, how exciting for me. And then I hear from top lane, where 2 people are in a nice, reasonably easy lane. Like, what were you guys, like Void and Dazzle or something like that?
Something like that.
And all of a sudden, I hear, oh, my bad, Vengeful Spirit's missing. Oh, wait, who's that literally already right behind me as my Courier? Waddles ever so close. And there goes the Courier, there goes my bottle, and I die. And not only that, he picks up the bottle and then taunts me, complaining about how it's not working properly for the rest of the entire game.
Yeah,
Which of course we lose.
we gotta contact iStrug about that bottle not working. But now it doesn't really matter because the items will not drop from the Courier. So that's an interesting change, and we'll talk about this as a whole after I get finished with the rest of these changes. Now, when the Courier actually dies, it respawns after 3 minutes with the items on them, so you have to wait 3 minutes if it dies. And the reason that's important is because you can actually, the reason all these changes were made, because the Flying Courier no longer has invulnerability shield. So it's not like the worst thing if it dies, but that's a big, negative, obviously, just having to wait 3 minutes, especially for somebody mid like you were just talking about. And the last change for the Courier is the basic Courier is magic immune.
Yeah, and I just want to say I really, really like the removal of the invulnerability shield. I think a lot of times you use the Courier in a way that, I mean, you do a lot of aggressive scouting, you can even block neutral creep spawns, and you didn't really have to be too careful with it, because let's be honest, early in the game, there's really no way for a team to pick off a Flying Courier. Especially with invulnerability. Now you at least have to be a little bit more careful with the placement, how you use it to scout around, and if you get caught in kind of an awkward situation where you kind of forgot about the Courier was bringing you an item, and you're on the other side of the map, it's not like it's impossible to get that quick kill on the Courier. So
Right.
I think that's a good change overall.
And obviously this affects more than just this one instance I'm going to bring up because it affects everybody. Everybody has to basically take account for the chicken where it is, or the courier, I should say, the donkey, the flying donkey. I think the biggest change and the biggest nerf overall, which I love because I always hated this, is bottle fairing can now be countered. Like you were saying, there is no way to really kill a courier, especially in the early stages of the game, because of the invulnerability if it's flying. And which means that you can bottle fairy to your heart's content and nobody can do anything about it. It's almost impossible. I mean, you have to set up some major ass ganks on this freaking donkey to actually do something, and then of course you're wasting a lot of time doing so. So now it allows you to give a 3-minute window where this guy mid doesn't have his bottle, and I think that is enormous. And I don't know why it bothers me that bottle fairing is completely broken, plain and simple, because anything that doesn't have any counter in the entire game is broken, in my book at least. And this completely, on paper at least, it nullifies that to a big extent. So I'm very happy. Very happy.
Agreed, good sir. Let's see, as far as other stuff,
Buyback.
what else do we have? Oh yes, the buyback cooldown. And this is actually an issue that you've not been a huge fan of, is the buyback system overall in Dota 2. But the cooldown for buybacks has been increased from 4 minutes to 5, and 5 is actually, I mean, it's a good chunk of time. So that's a long time you have to wait before being able to buy back once again. Again, I don't know if that really solves some of the issues that you've kind of had with the buyback system, in that, still you can basically sit back, play passive, farm a whole bunch, and then, by the time they'll push, maybe 5 minutes have passed, and you can still buy back once again. But I think it's at least a step in kind of the right direction. I just don't know if that's kind of the tactic I would use for making buybacks a little bit less annoying in long games.
Yeah, and I mean, there's no buyback system that's perfect. I think that's been proven from game to game and from change to change in each patch. But, I mean, obviously this is better than it was before. I still don't like the buyback system that's currently in place. I think there needs to be some sort of a limit overall. I'm not going to go on too much of a tangent, but the cooldown increase is obviously good for the way they want to do it here. Some sort of like we've talked about this before, where you need to find a way to incentivize, is that right?
Does not sound right. But
That does not sound right. All right, I'm going to use it, and we'll see how it goes. What's the word I'm looking for then? Give incentive to. What's the word I'm looking for? All right, anyway, whatever that word is, I'm just going to use incentivize. You guys can...
incentivize works, it's just, it sounds very silly. Anyways,
Okay.
go ahead.
Well, you need to basically incentivize people to be able to... my English is awful right now. I'm just flustered.
Speak in Farsi, quick.
I can't speak in Farsi. It's not gonna. I can only cuss, unfortunately. You want to promote
Russian accent.
You like to talk like this. You want to promote people to actually buy out in early game to make more exciting, but later game you want to limit them by quite a degree. So maybe some sort of system where... and my accent's just going nowhere now. But yeah, basically that system, and some sort of you have to find a happy medium between the two. And I don't like the way it is now. It's too static. It's too god-awful. People, like you said, can just wait the 5 minutes. Not a big deal for somebody like Furion, who is literally, for me at least, the most annoying hero in the entire game, and I can't stand playing against him. If I was in a CM game, I'd ban him every single time. But that's just me.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and we've kind of gone over some of the pluses and minuses of different buyback systems in our top 10 things we love and hate video that we did quite a long time ago, and that really hasn't changed too much as far as this one thing. I still think they need to figure out some way of having an incentive for the better team continuing to farm better than the other team. If you just have a limit on buybacks, then you kind of lose that. But hey, not going to get into too much detail there. I think that this is better than it was before.
Yes.
Does it make a significant change? I don't know. Heroes actually respawn now with full mana. Thank you, God. I don't know if full mana is maybe necessary, but like, I mean, how it was before, you would spawn with almost no mana, and I would literally sit in the fountain, just sitting there waiting. I'm like, okay, they're pushing the racks right now. I'll leave when I'm at like a third mana, so I can get out there and at least try and help and like stop them. But it was pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure why this was even changed. I mean, I found it annoying, but I can certainly understand why they would implement the original, because you don't... I mean, it basically might, in some ways... I guess you could look at it both ways. In some ways, if you're trying to defend, it'll extend the game because you can get there right away, and in some ways, if you want to get to the other side of the map, it definitely helps speed up the game. So I guess you can look at it both ways. I think this makes zero difference in the grand scheme of things just because of those examples I just made, so I'm not sure Not really sure where that came from, to be perfectly
Yeah, it's
honest.
just more of an annoyance factor than
Yeah.
any kind of major change. Another change that they did make is they basically removed the possibility of getting the same room twice in a row. So basically, you can't get the same rune spawn twice in a row. Which again, as you kind of harken back to a little bit ago, they're trying to remove some of the complete randomness in the game, but um, overall, I have to say, I hate it when it's just like, oh, I'm gonna get like 3 illusion runes in a row. How fun! Or when you're playing against someone and they're like, "Oh, good, they're gonna get like 3 regeneration, runes in a row." Or they're pebbles and they're already destroying me. And they're
Tiny.
gonna get like 3 tiny, and they're gonna get like 3 haste runes and run around crapping over my team. And they're gonna complain about me not calling Missy. I'm like, come on, how am I supposed to know he's gonna get 3 haste runes in a row? So, I don't know. I like that they're adding a little bit more variability, and a little bit more forced randomness, I guess.
Yeah, I wonder where they got that changed from. And
Yeah.
moving on to the brand new items in Dota 2, which were in Dota for about I'd say 3 weeks. Probably is a good estimate of that. Let me find the actual. Go ahead and go to the first item while I find it on here.
Alright, well the first item is, and this is going to be fun pronunciation time, because some of these I just don't know, but Rod of Atos, Rod of Atos.
Atos sounds good. Rod of Atos.
Atos, there we go. Basically, it requires a couple Staff of Wizardries and a Vitality Booster. And the long, I guess the short summary of it is it has a nice cast range and it applies a 50% slow for 4 seconds. And I think because it's relatively cheap, because it gives you a lot of intelligence as well as some stats with the Vitality Booster, some health, I really like this item. I think it's very flexible in how you use it. I think you can get it feasibly on some kind of well-farming kind of sideline heroes or support heroes and allow them to have kind of another utility item to kind of cast. The mana cost is not very high, so you don't have to necessarily use it on a hero that has a huge mana pool. Overall, I think it's a good item.
Amazing item for a couple reasons. In fact, when I say amazing, I mean it's a great item. I don't know if it's good for balancing because it might be too good in my opinion. The stats it gives are really good, obviously. It's actually funny. We were just talking about how Necrolite has no slow or no stun other than really his ultimate, which we won't count. Picking up something like this might make a lot of sense. I mean, he gets 250 HP, he gets 25 intelligence, and he gets a slow. So, I mean, that's pretty freaking good. So I am a real big fan of this item. Like you said, heroes in between, like, not a ward bitch type support hero are going to get it, but somebody like right above that notch probably start getting items like this. And really, really good item. I'm interested to see how it's going to be used. Obviously, this is all based on paper, what we're just looking at, just visualizing what would actually happen. We actually haven't seen it in action, but it's definitely a good item.
Yeah, and I think in the end, like when you look at that, there isn't really a hero that you could genuinely say that's a bad item to get.
Yeah.
And when I think of that, that basically means it's a pretty darn good item, especially for the price. Next item is Heaven's Halberd, which basically is a combination of Sage and Talisman of Evasion, which is always nice to see that
Yay.
incorporated into something else other than a butterfly, so that's always fun. Basically, this item gives you sort of the basic stuff from the Talisman of Evasion and Sage. So you get a maim and % chance to miss, or have attacks miss that are applied to you. But more importantly, you can cast a Disarm, which has 600 range, about 100 mana cost, and it does not allow that target to attack for 4 seconds if they're ranged, or 3 if they are melee. Obviously a very good item against kind of auto-attacking carry-type heroes.
Amazing item. This is going to be a common comment, except for
Yeah,
maybe
except
one. This is a freaking amazing item. And the one thing that we were talking about, I love how, like, for so long, I mean, SNY is a good item overall. It's not bad. It's not an orb anymore, so it makes it even better. If you get just Yasha, you can just turn that into a Manta. If you get just Sage, with some people, which some people do, including competitive players, they just get Sage just because of the stats and nothing else. They didn't even care about the maim that much. If you can get a Sage and add on a Talisman of Evasion, which is another item which I wish they had come out with a recipe for other than just Butterfly, combine them and you have a great item just based on stats alone. And aside from that, obviously you get that amazing Disarm, which, like you said, it's going to be great against carry heroes. Like, it's going to be huge against an anti-mage, for example. So really good item, great stats, and can't really complain.
Yeah, and I hope this means they're eventually going to make S and Y disassemblable because
It could be, for all we know.
That's true. I have not tested in the most recent patch, but I really hope that if it is not already, it will be. Moving on to item number 3, and this is the one that I just did. Ring of Aquila?
Yeah.
Huh? Yeah.
Yeah, Aquila.
Sure, we'll go with that. Basically, this is kind of more of a lower tier kind of item, but at least allows you to upgrade something as in a Wraith Band and Ring of Basilius in this case. Basically, all it really does is combines the two together. And it's really that simple. I don't really have too much to add to it. I mean, it's a solid item to get, especially if you're kind of a support and maybe a pushing team. It's not bad. It doesn't seem amazing. I don't really have much to add to that.
Yeah, it's a neutral item. I mean, it just combines the two. I mean, I think, and again, I could be technically wrong on this, but I'm 99% sure I'm correct. You literally gain nothing other than inventory space from combining these two. So if you're a hero that's going to end up getting a Ring of Basilius with a Wraith Band at some point, it'll combine. Beautiful. You only have one slot that's going to be used. So no reason not to get in that case if you're already building that way, but I don't think it really negatively or positively affects anything other than just the inventory space. So I think that's fine. It's not a good or a bad thing. It's fine.
And it's kind of like sometimes on certain heroes like Potom or stuff like that. You want to have the mana regen. You might pick up a Wraith Band. Now you can combine them.
Yeah.
So
wait.
Now we move on to.
How about we do the one that's?
See. We want to do it. See, this is the opposite. We should have done Abyssal Blade first, using our bad to good logic. Anyways.
Yeah. Let's go with Tranquil Boots.
Tranquil Boots, another item I'm actually a very big fan of. Boots for kind of more of a support role. Basically takes Boots of Speed plus Ring of Regeneration and a Ring of Protection. It gives you a little bit of a movement buff if you're not being attacked. Also gives you some HP regen, some armor, and more importantly a castable spell, 25 mana. Restores 150 HP over 10 seconds. So that's 15 HP per second. That's, I mean, for 25 mana, the cooldown's a little bit long at 40 seconds, but still being able to maybe keep a carry in a lane without having them focus on maybe getting some health regen right off the bat. I really like that item.
And okay, so I've heard this quite a bit from certain people, Dota veterans and famous Dota people, but they don't like this just based on just initial reaction. They think this item's garbage, and I say to you, you're incorrect, sir. These are great boots for ward bitches, which everybody needs a ward bitch on their team, a support hero that basically can't get any farm. They're going to get boots at some point, like 15 minutes in the game, and guess what? If they get a Ring of Protection and Ring of Regen, which they might already have to begin with, they're going to have these boots, which give plus 80 move speed when you're not being attacked, which is great for roaming. Cough, cough. Maybe we'll see more roaming here. And of course, the passive regen and armor is going to be helpful nonetheless. And the active, honestly, it seems a little random. I mean, it's not random in the fact that being not helpful, it's definitely helpful, but it's kind of like an Urn of Shadows to some degree, I guess. But you can only use it on yourself, obviously. But overall, very, very cheap boots. And I think you're going to see this a lot on support heroes. Mark my words.
Yep, and finally, last but not least, we get to the one
least,
item.
Yes.
Well, that is true, I guess, in this case.
Last
in
and
your
least.
opinion, we get to Abyssal Blade, which is actually the most expensive item in the game now. It takes a Sacred Relic and Cranium Basher. Basically, all it really does is combine the two. You get a little bit of an extra strength bonus. You still get the bash, and then you also have one active spell, which is Overwhelm. Basically, this is a melee range casting spell, 60-second cooldown. Takes a lot of mana actually at 150, and it's basically a 2-second stun that will go through magic immunity. And the one thing that jumps out at you is the cast range is 140, which basically means you have to be right up in their face to get this spell off. And I think just because of the numbers on that active spell, it makes it a little bit of an iffy item. As far as general stats, as far as an item maybe really late in the game to get, it's not bad. But I really just wish the active was a little bit better as far as the numbers.
No, okay, they can change this to make it good. So don't get me wrong there. It's just the way it works right now is off. You're taking a Cranium Basher, which some may disagree with me, but I think is one of the most worthless items in the game, and you're making it a more worthless, expensive item. For 6,750 gold, you can literally get any other item in the game. Why would you get this over a Radiance, let's say, or an MKB, or even a Divine Rapier? I would prefer, even the risk factor involved with that, I'd prefer that over Abyssal Blade. And, I mean, you're going to be getting this on your carry. I mean, nobody else is going to freaking get this ridiculously expensive item. You're only getting 100 damage. How much is what a Divine Rapier is? 300 damage now, right? So it's a 200 damage difference. You get this passive, which is, you know, not consistent at all, which is the biggest harp on it. And like you said, the cast range is stupid. It's 140 is god awful. Just plain and simple. But again, a lot of time you're going to be a melee hero, so maybe that doesn't make that much of a difference. But either way, for that much gold, you're expecting more out of it. Plus, it's 150 mana, which a lot of carriers aren't going to have the mana capacity to actually use. So, and a 60-second cooldown, like you said. So, it's not a good item. If you buy this, it's more of a troll item. Divine Rapier is more viable than Abyssal Blade.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're speaking of like pure damage kind of items, like MKB only costs an additional 1,600 gold, and you basically get, what is it, like 88 damage, you get attack speed, you get the true strike, and you get the percent chance to do a little mini bash plus 100 extra damage. So it just seems a little bit weird. It seems like it's trying to do certain things, but it's not really good at either of them. I mean, it doesn't really give you any additional damage other than just combining the two items, and the active stun just isn't... Because I think of the range and the cooldown, it's just not that great.
If the range is increased, it could be somewhat viable. And the only reason I say this is because when I initially read this, I'm like, oh, that's an interesting item, because it goes through Magic Immunity. I'm just picturing an Enigma ulting with BKB, and you can maybe ult over his, or you can stun him over his ult, or over his black hole, but you have to be sniffing his anus to be able to stun him out of it. So it's completely worthless in that aspect. And I mean, don't get me wrong, if this was like $2,000 cheaper, it might be a good item, but for 6,750 gold and the most expensive item in the game, it's terrible, terrible item. But again, little tweaks like the price, or even just some of the stats, or the cast range or whatnot, if some of those things are tweaked a little bit, it could potentially be good. I like the fact that they're bringing a late game item back into play here, because we haven't seen one in quite a while. Maybe Ethereal Blade is one of those we never see. It's more situational. And again, I have no problem with situational items, but this is just a worthless item. Abyssal Blade, that is. My opinion.
I agree with that too, but as with all these things, we'll have to wait and see how it plays out in the games with all the heroes and everything else going on. And speaking of getting to play these out in the games, we have actually gone through, and although we didn't cover everything in the balance patch, we did get through a lot of the major topics here. Whew! I feel like I just ran a marathon, to be honest.
My balls are dripping sweat in excitement that we're finished.
Alright, well, again, thanks guys for tuning in. This is more of like a patch update podcast, to be honest, and a quick review, but as you guys can see, this is quite a big patch to get our mouths around, so to speak. Much appreciate you guys tuning in for this very long wink patch. And we're very excited to go play it. I hope you guys are too, because really this is the definitive patch so far of the Dota 2 beta. It's a huge patch, huge balance changes, as well as the addition of 2 new heroes, some UI tweaks, and everything else that went into it. So very excited about this patch, very excited about not only just this patch, but what this kind of means as far as the relationship between Dota 2 and Dota. We kind of thought that maybe Dota would be sort of the test bed for Dota 2. We wouldn't get to see a lot of these new kind of cool changes right away in the Dota 2 beta, but as you can see, I mean, they only released this patch in the original Dota game, all of like a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. So I'm kind of excited to see how quickly they're taking all these changes and putting them right into Dota 2.
Yep, nothing to add. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'm just more excited that we're actually getting patches now, because like you said, there's a 3-week delay, or not delay, but a postponement. That's not even the right... My vocabulary is god-awful. Let's just pretend I didn't say that. But basically, the last time we had a Dota 2 patch was like 3 weeks ago, and now that we finally come up with this enormous patch, I think every week there's going to be probably a new hero, and we're going to get back on track. And very excited for this year.
Very excited indeed. And speaking of back on track, I think we're going to get you back on track with some of those GRE vocab cards that we used to study.
Oh boy.
We'll start fitting in like a secret vocab word to each and every patch update, and we'll see if people can guess what it is in the
Amalgamation.
future. Something to... Yeah. Well, great. Now you took the first one. It's a little unfortunate. Thanks so much for watching. This is, of course, Xenoside here with Suns Fan. Look forward to seeing all of you cuddly guys next week to do another patch update. Hint, hint, Valve. Start doing them every week again. Thank you very much. And we're, of course, going to go take a shower, of course, after this long patch update, and then hopefully go play some Dota 2. So we'll see you guys out there.